There is something you may have noticed about yourself that no one around you ever quite understood. You walk into a crowded place, a shopping mall, a subway station, a busy street, a party full of people laughing and talking, and within minutes, sometimes within seconds, something inside you begins to shift. A subtle heaviness descends. Your shoulders pull inward. Your chest tightens in a way you cannot explain to a doctor, because there is no name for it on any medical form. Your mind, which was clear just moments ago, becomes foggy, overloaded, as though someone turned up the volume on a frequency only you can hear. And by the time you finally leave that place and return to the quiet of your own space, you are not simply tired. You are a different kind of exhausted. One that sleep does not fully erase. One that lingers in your bones the next morning, and sometimes the morning after that. The world has a simple explanation for this. You are anxious. You are introverted. You are sensitive. Maybe, they suggest gently, you simply need to push yourself a little more, expose yourself to discomfort, build a thicker skin. But what if the explanation runs far deeper than that? In many esoteric and spiritual traditions, there exists a concept that speaks directly to what you may have been experiencing your entire life. It is the idea that certain souls, upon incarnating into physical form, carry an energetic field that is not sealed in the same way as most people around them. According to these teachings, most humans move through the world with what might be described as a relatively closed energetic boundary. They feel their own emotions, process their own stress, and largely remain within the walls of their own internal experience. But then there are others. Souls who, according to various spiritual lineages and metaphysical interpretations, arrive with a fundamentally different kind of sensitivity. Their field is open, permeable, like a crystal tuned to receive frequencies from every direction at once. In the language of those who follow Pleiadian spiritual philosophy, these are often described as starseeds, souls understood symbolically as carrying a deeper cosmic origin, woven from a consciousness that remembers a reality where separation between beings was not the norm, where feeling another's pain, joy, or fear was simply the natural condition of existence. And perhaps that is precisely why, in this dense and often chaotic world, you struggle so profoundly in crowds. Not because something is broken in you, but because you were never designed to be a wall. You were designed, in the symbolic language of these teachings, to be a window. The question that the Pleiadian wisdom tradition invites you to sit with is not how to close yourself off entirely. It is something more subtle and more powerful than that. What if you were never meant to absorb what you feel? What if you were meant to transmute it? There is a significant difference between those two experiences, and understanding that difference may be one of the most quietly transformative realizations you encounter on your path. When you absorb the energy of a crowd, you take it in without filtering. You become the emotional landfill for dozens or hundreds of people who are each carrying their own unprocessed fear, frustration, grief, and anxiety. The commuter next to you on the train who is silently furious about something that happened at work. The mother in the supermarket whose exhaustion runs deeper than a bad week. The stranger in the coffee shop cycling through a loop of worry that has no clear source. You do not choose to receive these transmissions. They simply pass through your open field and settle inside you. And because they are not yours, your body and your mind do not know what to do with them. They sit there, undigested, slowly draining the reserves you need for your own life. This is what some spiritual interpretations refer to as the psychic sponge dynamic, and according to the Pleiadian teachings that many find meaningful, it is one of the most common challenges experienced by those who carry this kind of open, field sensitivity. But here is what the tradition also teaches, and this is the part that changes everything. The sponge is not your true nature. It is a pattern, a learned response, one that developed, in most cases, very early in your life, before you had any framework for understanding what was happening to you. As a child, you felt things intensely. You cried when others were sad. You felt the tension in a room before anyone had spoken a word. You were the one who sensed that something was wrong in your family long before it was ever acknowledged out loud. And because no one explained to you what was actually occurring in your energetic field, you did the only thing a child can do. You tried to process it all by yourself. You opened wider to understand it. You absorbed it, hoping that by feeling it fully, it might stop. And so the pattern deepened, year by year, body by body, crowd by crowd. The Pleiadian perspective, as interpreted through various esoteric and spiritual frameworks, suggests that your sensitivity was never the problem. The absence of a conscious relationship with it was. You were given a rare instrument and handed no instruction. You were sent into the noise without being taught how to tune. That is what begins to shift now. In many meditative and energy-focused traditions, there is a practice sometimes described as anchoring your field. It is not about building walls. Walls are heavy, and they require constant maintenance. What these teachings describe is something more like developing an internal center of gravity so strong, so luminous, so deeply rooted in your own essence, that when you enter a crowd, you move through it the way a lighthouse stands in a storm. Not absorbing the ocean, not fighting it, simply being so clearly itself that the waves pass around it. According to symbolic Pleiadian teachings, each soul carries what might be understood as a central light point. In many traditions, this corresponds to the area of the heart, not the physical organ, but the energetic center that sits at the core of your being. This is understood as your personal frequency, your signature vibration, the specific note your soul plays in the larger symphony of existence. When this center is active, clear, and consciously held, it functions as a kind of natural field regulator. The energies of others may approach it. They may brush against it, but they do not enter. The challenge is that for most highly sensitive souls, this center has never been consciously cultivated. It has been available, always. It has been the quiet hum beneath all the noise. But without intention, without awareness, without a daily practice of returning to it, the field remains unanchored. And an unanchored field in a crowded world is an invitation for everything passing by to move in and stay. So what does this look like in practice? Not as doctrine, not as certainty, but as a symbolic and meditative framework that many have found to carry genuine resonance. Before you enter any dense or crowded space, there is a simple act that various spiritual traditions describe in different languages but share in essence. It is the act of returning to your center. Before you cross the threshold, take a single slow breath, not performatively, not as a ritual you rush through, but as a genuine pause, a moment in which you ask yourself, quietly and without pressure, where am I right now? Am I rooted in my own field, or have I already begun to drift toward what waits outside? In the Pleiadian symbolic framework, this is sometimes described as lighting your inner lamp before stepping into the dark. Not because the world outside is dangerous, but because a lamp that is already burning cannot be extinguished by wind the way a lamp, not yet lit, can be. Some who work within these traditions describe a simple visualization in this breath, a soft, warm light originating in the center of the chest, not forced, not bright or aggressive, simply present, like an ember that has always been there and is now being gently acknowledged. They hold that image for just a few seconds before entering the crowd, and they report that something in the experience of the crowd changes. Not that they become numb to it, not that they stop sensing the emotional currents around them, but that they sense them from a different position, from inside rather than from swept away. This is the symbolic distinction between the open sponge and the rooted transmuter. The transmuter still feels, still senses, still receives the frequency of those around them. But the receiving no longer destabilizes them. It passes through the clarity of their own field, and according to these teachings, is actually gently elevated by the contact. The transmuter does not drain those around them. They do not perform healing on anyone. Simply by being rooted in their own clean frequency, they contribute something stabilizing to the space they move through. Without effort, without sacrifice, without losing even a single drop of their own light. There is another dimension to this that the Pleiadian teachings speak to with particular tenderness, and it addresses something you may have felt but perhaps never said aloud. You have sometimes felt guilty for wanting to leave, for not being able to stay in the party longer, for excusing yourself from gatherings earlier than others, for choosing the quiet night at home over the social event you were invited to, for declining things that should, by all outward appearances, be enjoyable. The world has ways of making this feel like failure, like you are not trying hard enough, like your sensitivity is a weakness you are choosing not to overcome. According to many spiritual and contemplative traditions, this guilt itself is one of the most draining forces a sensitive person can carry. It adds a second layer of weight to what is already a genuinely exhausting experience. You are not only processing the crowd, you are then also judging yourself for struggling with it. The symbolic invitation of the Pleiadian framework here is gentle but clear. Your need for sanctuary is not a flaw in your design. It is a feature of it. A lighthouse is not a lighthouse without the land it is built on. You cannot transmit light you have not first allowed yourself to hold. Rest, solitude, quiet, spaciousness, these are not indulgences for a soul of your sensitivity. They are, in the language of these teachings, energetic nourishment. They are the conditions under which your field clears, replenishes, and returns to its natural luminosity. This does not mean you must withdraw from the world entirely. It means you begin to move through the world with more wisdom about what it asks of you and what you genuinely have to offer it. The difference between entering a crowd from a place of unconscious openness and entering it from a place of conscious rootedness is, according to these traditions, the difference between depletion and presence. And presence is what these teachings suggest you were actually sent here to offer. Not your pain, not your exhaustion, not the accumulated weight of everyone else's unprocessed emotion. Your presence, clear, warm, grounded, alive. There is also something the Pleiadian symbolic tradition speaks about in relation to the time after a crowd experience. The return to yourself. Because even when you are learning to move through density more consciously, there will be days when the weight still settles. Days when a particular environment or a particular gathering carries something unusually dense, and you feel it in your body that evening, that next morning. This is not a sign that the practice is failing. It is a natural part of existing in physical form with the kind of sensitivity you carry. For these moments, many contemplative and energy-focused traditions suggest what might be described as a conscious releasing practice. Not complicated, not requiring anything external, simply the act of acknowledging, with the same gentleness you would offer a tired friend, that what you are carrying may not entirely belong to you. A quiet internal recognition. This weight is not mine. I receive it with compassion. I release it with intention. Some who work within these frameworks accompany this with breath, with water, with time in natural settings, with silence, not as superstition, but as symbolic acts that communicate to the body and the deeper levels of the nervous system that the work of the day is complete and the field is now free to clear. According to the Pleiadian spiritual philosophy shared by many teachers and interpreted across many communities, you were not sent here to carry the world. You were sent here to illuminate it. And illumination does not require suffering. It does not require depletion. It requires only that you remain, as fully as possible, what you actually are, a being of genuine sensitivity, of deep perception, of quiet and unperformative care. Rooted in your own light, moved by what is real, but never swept away by what is not yours to hold. The crowd will always exist. The world will always hum with frequencies of every kind. But you, with practice, with intention, with the gradual cultivation of that inner center of gravity, may find that walking through it becomes less like drowning and more like moving through water that parts gently around a flame that nothing, finally, can put out, whether understood as spiritual metaphor, meditative framework, or simply a poetic lens for exploring what it means to be an unusually sensitive human being alive in a noisy world. This invitation stands. Come back to your center before you cross the threshold. Carry your light into the crowd. And when you return, give yourself the gift of returning fully to yourself, not as a ritual, not as a performance, but as the quiet and radical act of honoring what you are. The sensitivity that exhausted you for so long may yet become the very thing that makes your presence in this world quietly, undeniably, irreplaceable.